Google is getting smarter and smarter and more aggressive with cracking down. Core updates are getting harsher. SEO and AI search professionals need to think about how can we adapt to this new landscape by adjusting the content on our website, earning more brand mentions offsite, whether it's engaging more with our social teams. There's lots of implications there.
Right now, there are businesses that are waking up to 50, 70, even 90% traffic losses, and they have no idea what they did wrong. They followed SEO best practices, they published content, they even invested maybe in AI, and yet Google just decided that they're no longer trustworthy.
That's actually where I spend most of my time professionally in the last 10 or so years. Generally speaking, if you get hit by a core update, you're going to see impact across the board, more or less. It's a different conversation because now it's not just a matter of fixing the problem. You have to fix the problem, and you have to wait until Google's systems decide that you can be back in their good graces. So the first thing you want to do is...
Today, I'm joined by Lily Ray, one of the few people that actually understands what is happening behind Google's curtain, and she's here to kind of answer the question that everyone is sort of afraid to ask. Is SEO even working anymore, or are we just stuck with outdated playbooks? Lily, I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. I have so many good questions for you. In case people don't know who you are, do you mind just introducing yourself?
For sure. Yeah, and thanks for having me again. I'm excited to be here. So I serve as the VP of SEO Strategy and Research at AMSIV. It's an agency where I've worked at for just over 8 years now. And I oversee our SEO department with a few other amazing directors. And we also have been doing, knee deep in AI search over the last year or two as well. So we do offer AEO consulting as well.
Awesome. So that's where I'm going to start us off, because I feel like this is one of the biggest hotly debated topics. What do you think about AI content? Is it actually dangerous, or is Google just punishing how people are using it?
Yeah, it's a pretty nuanced question. First of all, if you read Google's guidance about using AI content, they very clearly say it's okay to use AI content, right? But it really matters basically how it's used and how it's executed. It's been against Google's policies for years, probably decades, to just rely on like automated content in a way where you're creating lots of content that doesn't really have any human oversight or editing or anything, and in a way that doesn't provide any like unique or original value. So that's been true for like literally 20 plus years. So this is kind of an extension of that, where it's okay to use AI in your content. And there's certainly many, many examples of AI content working. But if you're basically just setting it and forgetting it and not really reviewing the content from a human perspective, ensuring that it's offering something valuable and original and that hasn't already been said in many different places online, you could be setting yourself up. It's very risky. So I think it really matters how you approach it. Now, I think there's companies that are doing it really well, where they're integrating original data from their company, maybe original research that they've done. They're creating custom images or whatever it is, where they can really kind of say this content has a lot of AI in it, but it's really unique. It's doing something different. I think that can work really well. But what we're seeing in many cases is people get really excited about setting up some type of automation where they're using just purely AI generated content and maybe scaling a lot of that content really quickly. And more often than not, you'll see eventually that Google catches up to that and demotes that type of content.
Now, you said my favorite word, scale. I actually hate the word scale, but like we always tell people, whenever you do any strategy at scale, it's likely that Google will pick up on it. So I'm not a big fan of scaling strategies like that. But to kind of, I know people are going to be wondering, like, how much is too much? At what point is it at scale? It's a hard thing to define. So let's say, for example, that you have a small business site. Is there a certain percentage of pages where you'd be like, oh, that's too many? Mm-hmm. Or is there a benchmark there at all?
So it's not like a raw number, but you really have to think about like relative to the number of pages on your site. Are you creating some type of footprint or pattern that looks unnatural? And mm-hmm. I'm sure you can relate to this in the local space, because one of the things I see all the time, and I'm sure you've seen all the time, and it's been talked about in the local SEO space for years, even before AI content, was creating lots of state pages and lots of city pages, right? That's something that people tend to scale a lot of because they see, oh, there's an opportunity here. If I make one page for every city in the United States or Canada or whatever, and say my business operates there, but the pages are basically the same, right? The only thing that changes is the name of the city or the name of the town, or maybe you use AI to change some things. Google's really good at catching that. And if you're a small business website that has 20 pages, but then you have 100 pages that are all city and state pages, that's proportionally something that I think they look at. And I've seen that over and over again. So you have to think about like the number of pages relative to how many other pages you already have on your site.
That's a great example, because I want to dig into that a bit. So service area pages are funny because they're something that I know certainly fall into the category of doorway pages, and they are things that I don't think Google wants people creating, but I have never seen Google capable of actually catching them, because I'm not sure they know the difference between a location page and a service area page half the time. So for example, let's talk about like Allstate Insurance, huge insurance company. They have 14,000 locations. So they've got 13 or 14,000 location pages, one for each of their offices. That's not bad in any way, shape, or form. So I'm not sure Google's great at distinguishing like that versus a business that maybe doesn't have 13,000 location, but has 13,000 service area pages.
Yeah.
Have you actually seen Google catch sites doing this? Like I've heard of one, but I was curious what you think.
To be honest, I have. I definitely have.
Okay.
I think that they're able to tie that the business has a real location, a real physical brick and mortar location or address, and like therefore you're allowed to have the page, right? I think about Home Depot all the time. They have tons of locations around the US, but they have pages to support each of their locations. Like that's fine. It's when you are, let's say, a service area business or a plumber or whatever it is, and you have one page for every city in the US, and the only thing that changes is the name of the city, but you don't really have locations there. I've also seen examples where the customer would have to like get on an airplane or drive 25 hours to get to the location. Like that's not a good user experience. So I think what they're trying to target in that case is when you're saying that you have locations all around the country, but you can't really substantiate it. I've actually seen that pretty often in a lot of the types of like sites that come to us when they've been hit by algorithm updates. Often that's one thing that a lot of these sites have in common.
Interesting. I was talking to cleaning service business on Reddit, and they got massacred last year, and they were convinced that it was their service area pages, but also their backlink profile is horrific. So I was looking at their links and I'm like, it could be either or.
Right.
I think my thought behind this is maybe one of the things that Google might be looking for is like brand search on the location level too, right? Because they can tell that. So we have a big client that has like 1,000 of these. And it always scares me because I'm always like, who knows? Like maybe one of these updates, like Google will decide they don't like these, but it's also a giant brand. They have so many locations that I think it almost justifies the number of service area pages they have. Because when you do the math, they only have like a few service area pages for every location. And then you'll see that they have like a lot of branded searches that surface all those service area pages, right? People searching for them in those towns, which probably helps them. But if you're like a cleaning service with one location with 3,000 service area pages, probably going to be easier for Google to nail that. Would that match kind of what you see?
Yeah. I mean, I think at the end of the day, I would just basically ask the question of like, do we really have a physical presence here? Right. And then you can kind of build from that. The sites that I see that are being targeted the most tend to have maybe like one or two corporate headquarters or locations, and then tens or hundreds of thousands of pages, right? So you really just have to ask the question of like, is this really a legitimate user experience where that a person in that city or in that state or in that neighborhood or whatever would really truly be able to like get in touch with somebody nearby from that business? I think that's kind of the criteria that they're using. I've seen a lot of examples, again, where it's very boilerplate and the company might only have 2 locations, but then they have not only a page for each state, but a page for each city as well. And there's just not a lot of differentiation on those pages.
Got it. When it comes to AI content specifically, do you think that there are certain industries that Google's scrutinizing more than others? So for example, is it more dangerous as a lawyer to use AI to help with content than it would be, for example, a plumber?
Yes, I do. I think that's something that's been true in the SEO space for a while. I think that there's stricter criteria for analysis for your money or life content. I think that continues to be true. Basically when Google is looking at a page, if it evaluates the page and says, okay, this page is handling sensitive subjects, whether it's talking about something political, right? Or legal issues, medical issues, financial recommendations, financial advice, those pages get held to a higher standard. So if they're seeing a lot of just purely AI generated content on medical topics, like that's going to be a bigger problem for them than someone who's maybe scaling content about puppies or whatever, right? I think like generally speaking, they're going to catch on to that more quickly. It doesn't mean that you're necessarily safe if you're in like a your money, your life, topic area. I just think that they're going to probably crack down on it more quickly if it's a your money, your life type of topic.
Sure. That makes sense. And that definitely aligns with what we've seen as well. Speaking of AI, let's talk about sites that have lost a lot of traffic due to AI. There's like so many mixed things on this. I've seen studies come out that talk about crazy amounts of traffic loss, like 40%, because of AI overviews or AI features in the search results. And then I've seen some where they're like, that's all a myth, and sites aren't really losing traffic. What have you seen as far as like how much traffic sites are losing once Google introduces AI more into the search results?
Okay, yeah. So in terms of the traffic impacts from new AI features and people starting their searches on, LLMs and AI overviews and stuff, 100% that's cutting into traffic in a really big way, right? The amount or the extent to which it cuts into a website's traffic really depends on how much of that traffic was kind of like informational upper funnel traffic in the first place. If you're answering a lot of like definition oriented questions, what is this? How does this work? Right? Questions that are very easily answered with AI, which for the record, that type of content drove hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue, right? For many of these big publishers over the last 10 years, right? It became very, very popular to write that type of content. That type of content is being, disproportionately impacted by AI, I would say. And a lot of the companies that have made, a lot of revenue doing that type of content, let's say in 2020, 2021, 2022, that was really the peak of it. A lot of those companies have seen absolute destructive, consequences from AI overviews and ChatGPT and everything. If you're more of like an e-commerce site, for example, where, people might be shopping for your categories or products or whatever, generally speaking, there's less of an impact that we've seen so far. I think that's starting to change in recent weeks and months, because we're starting to see AI overviews, for example, in AI mode answer a lot more questions about e-commerce and show products and everything directly in the SERP. But generally speaking, that distinction is really like the type of website that it is and the type of content that they create. So if the content's easily answered by AI, it's absolutely going to cut into your traffic for sure.
So what is the action item? So if you're a site that has lost a good amount of traffic because AI is basically giving the answer, and half the time they're like taking it from you, almost like taking your content, showing it there, and then the person doesn't click to go to your site. What is a business owner supposed to do in a scenario like that?
Yeah, so it depends how the site makes money. A lot of these sites have traditionally made money through page views and traffic, right? That's a really big challenge. Obviously, if Google and ChatGPT and the other LLMs are cutting into that informational traffic, and that was something that you relied on to pay the bills, you need to think about how else you can drive traffic to those pages that isn't just organic search, right? You need to think about what content can I be putting out there that still resonates with people and really encourages people to come visit our site and subscribe to our content or whatever it is, or, to go behind to pay for the content if you're using paywalls, because the content is really just that interesting and original and unique, and they can't get it from AI, right? So that's one thing. And they need to think about diversifying their traffic sources too, right? They need to think about maybe using more video content, using more audio interviews, like getting the content out there in some other way that's not just organic search. But for sites that don't monetize through traffic, right, which is most local businesses, most e-commerce websites, you don't really need to change that much, right? Obviously there's new implications with how to make sure your feeds and everything are set up for e-commerce. But like at the end of the day, people are going to be using AI to ask these questions, and you just want to be the recommended brand or the recommended product or the recommended business. So that gets back to like marketing fundamentals, right? How can we make sure that we are perceived as the best brand in our space? So it becomes a little bit more of like a branding and a digital PR play more than anything.
Yeah, so this begs the question, organic traffic was always seen as like the thing for SEO, right? So if there is less organic traffic going to websites, does this mean that businesses should stop investing as much in SEO? What is your take on that?
Well, I think organic traffic is just one piece of the puzzle. Even though that's the main metric I think SEOs have focused on for many years. And obviously, again, for sites that really care about traffic, because traffic is the main KPI, that's been something that SEOs have reported on with those types of companies. But it's just evolving now, where just because the traffic is changing doesn't mean that the demand for your business is changing. It's just that the surfaces that people are using to search for it are changing and evolving, right? So now we need to think about, how do we become the recommended brand in AI search? And there's a lot of SEO, requirements that go into that. There's still like your site health, right? Your site's crawlability, your site's discoverability. Can both search engines and large language models see the content on your website, understand the content on your website? There's lots of implications there. But then I do think, it's evolving in a way where I think, SEO and AI search professionals need to think about, how can we adapt to this new landscape by whether it's adjusting the content on our website, whether it's earning more brand mentions offsite, whether it's engaging more with our social teams to try to drive, organic conversations around our brand. Like, I just think, SEO teams are as busy as they ever have been, right? Even though traffic is changing, there's still a lot of tactics and techniques and collaboration that needs to happen with the SEO team and other teams to be able to still maintain visibility.
So that begs the question, what sources outside of Google are you focusing more on?
Sources inside of Google, like what?
Outside of Google.
Oh, outside of Google. Yeah.
Because we talked about how other sources matter too, and matter maybe a bit more than they used to. So what specific sources are you guys finding that you're focusing more on?
For sure. Yeah. I think, I think we've all kind of seen in the space over the last year that some of the most heavily cited websites within AI search tend to be the ones that were already actually doing quite well on Google, and Google's been trending towards elevating a lot more of this type of content. So user generated content and social media sites, right? We've already seen Reddit had a huge year starting in 2023 going into 2024 on Google, where it was just absolutely skyrocketing with, a new partnership with Google that was really increasing their visibility. Google also made some algorithmic changes that highlighted sites like Reddit. So, forum websites, Quora is another one. LinkedIn is another big one. We're definitely seeing, with LinkedIn polls, LinkedIn posts, even things like Threads, X, social media posts, this whole ecosystem of not just what's happening on your website, but what people are talking about on other sites, including social media sites, tend to get pulled in really quickly into AI search. So we're working very closely with our social media team. We have a dedicated team at AMSIV that does Reddit monitoring and engaging in conversations with customers and things like that. So it's just becoming more integrated, basically social media marketing, organic social media marketing and community management. And then video is a really big one, because large language models can understand video content. The more, especially Google loves to highlight its own product, YouTube. ChatGPT also tends to cite YouTube a lot, right? So it's the more that you can basically just take your content, take your message, and diversify all the different places that message is getting across, and also diversify the formats that you're using. So it's not just text, but it's also audio and video as well. The more chances you have for AI search to cite your brand.
So we had a really good question come in from somebody who's in the smaller business camp. So they said they kind of constantly rank in Google Maps for relevant keywords, but they don't really appear in the regular search results as well, because they're competing with, I guess it looks like they are an estate planning attorney, and they're competing with really big firms that I assume have been around for a long time. So they're trying to figure out what they can do to rank higher. I don't know, from my experience with small businesses, not all of them are willing to invest in YouTube, for example, because of the time commitment. It is a big time commitment. We don't try and sugarcoat it. We're if you're going to go big into YouTube, it's not a 1 foot in type of approach. You have to do it a lot and be consistent, and it requires a lot of effort. So what do you think the current landscape looks like for a small business that maybe is starting out or doesn't have the budget to kind of do all the things? Where would you start in that instance?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, it's definitely true that, going in on YouTube is not a simple thing you can just do really quickly. You want to do it right. I will say it's easier now than it ever has been, right? There's a lot of new AI tools out there that can help you take a long form video, for example, and splice it up into short videos, which do really well in, YouTube Shorts and TikToks and Instagram Reels and everything like that. So, even just creating one asset can be helpful. Like there's ways to repurpose that asset in different ways. And I also think one thing too is like, one trend that we've seen in social media over the last few years is that people really tend to like more authentic videos, right? Where maybe it's someone who's an expert on your team just having like a conversation where it's not super over-engineered. It's really just like person to person having that really authentic conversation. That's the type of content that generally tends to do really well. So I think, in many cases, even if there's a way to like just have an expert at your company who has opinions about the latest news or maybe wants to answer a really specific question, getting into that cadence where you're doing a bit more of that type of like really authentic, conversations from experts at your company, I think that can work really well as well. And myself, just personally speaking, like I do a lot of that type of content, whether it's on podcasts or whether it's like me sharing something really quick on YouTube, and I see like that sticks, that has really good like lasting power in both organic search and AI search as well. So one video can go a really long way.
That's a good point. Yeah. I think a lot of people don't probably repurpose their stuff enough. I know I'm guilty of that for sure. We are just pumping out new stuff all the time. So I'm sure we could do better at that. I want to dig into specifically like a couple of the core updates. And I think in local SEO, last year's updates were pretty dramatic compared to what I've ever seen. So I don't know if you've heard this as well, because I'm not sure how many of the sites that you look at are kind of like local in nature, but the June core update, the August spam update, and the December core update were very significant for a lot of sites. Let's just talk about the last one, since it's the most recent one, the December 2025 update. What were the main patterns that you saw from that update as far as like what sites were losing? Let's talk losing first.
Yeah, I mean, I have to like dig back up the article I wrote. I mean, one thing that's really interesting about the December core update is that it ended in, I want to say like late December, early January 2026. And what I thought was really interesting was that the week after that, we actually saw a ton of volatility, like ranking volatility from Google, where in the last 2 weeks, so basically like late January 2026, we started to see these like after effects where it seemed like Google wasn't done yet. And that's something I've seen before where it's like, maybe the update didn't work out exactly how they wanted it to, and they have to make some tweaks after the fact. So I've actually seen more volatility in the last like 2 weeks than I did during the core update. But something that was really significant stood out to me during the December core update was a lot of informational sites that have actually done really well over the years. So I'm thinking of a number of like pretty big health publishers, and including publishers that are part of the same media company, and then also other media companies that have various different brands. A lot of those brands took a really big hit in December after having done really well in SEO for a long time. So that's interesting to me. Sometimes when you see like a whole category shifting, it's like, what's going on there? Sometimes Google like pulls the levers a bit where I feel like they try to elevate more user-generated content and maybe like less upper funnel explanatory informational content, which I think we saw last time. But just like looking at my article that I wrote, Wikipedia, Amazon, Facebook, and Reddit, IMDb all saw some drops during the December core update, which it's hard to draw conclusions from that. But I do think one trend that we did see was that a lot of user-generated content sites actually saw a slight uptick during the update, which is a trend that we've seen consistent for many different core updates over the last couple of years.
Yeah, a big one in local, I know that got a really big lift last year was Facebook groups. It's just shocking to see how many Facebook posts I see now on Google for local queries. Definitely wasn't something that was there the year before. One thing that I've noticed, I work with a lot of lawyers, and we've seen like cases where the search results have gone from Google showing, let's just say 5 different law firms on the first page to nothing but .gov sites. So essentially they'll have like, and .gov sites are always notorious for having horrific SEO.
Yeah.
They generally don't rank well. And we always used to get excited whenever we, outrank a .gov site. It was always great. That's getting harder and harder to do.
Yeah.
And I've even seen lots of cases where they'll take the same URL and they'll list like 4 pages from a .gov site before they list any lawyers.
Yeah.
So it's like they're preferring to list the same website over and over and over again if it's an authoritative site over like anybody else.
100%. I think that's a really great point. So that's actually something that I've seen as well. And that was actually an outcome from this new algorithm change that Google did after the core update. Is something that I noticed was a lot of .gov sites were increasing. And that's what you said is exactly what I see as well. So it's basically like the sites that are over investing in SEO tend to see a slight decline. And who fills in the gaps? It's either user-generated content like Facebook groups and Reddit and Quora and stuff like that, or it's .gov, right? Or it's something where it's like, you even said, like, they don't have the best SEO, right? And I feel like sometimes that's exactly what Google's looking for lately, right? They're looking for the people that there's no SEO involved. It's just authentic, official information coming straight from the source, as opposed to lots of different people that are trying to manipulate the search results in their favor. So that's something to pay attention to for sure. If you're seeing a .gov site cited 7 times, it could be an example of a category that Google feels is overly manipulated with SEO.
Yeah, we had a question from someone who said, I know of a nationwide business that had been reliably above the fold for most locations. They fall into page 2 or 3 of organic rankings since December. Potential suspects include lackluster core web vitals, JS pre-rendering, vapid content, declining CTR. I'm not sure any of those are really getting to the core issue, though. Would you agree? Like, do you think technical stuff is what you'd look at in the case of the December core update?
So it's usually not like a smoking gun, right? I mean, there's cases where someone does something with their tech SEO that causes a lot of problems. Maybe they accidentally no index a folder, or they accidentally block something from being crawled. But usually when you see it aligned with a core update really closely, it's not like core web vitals are usually not the smoking gun. That said, everything works together. So if you have a really poorly, performing website where people land on it and they have a really hard time navigating, and there's lots of disruptive ads and the site's really slow, Google can see at scale that the users are having a bad experience, and that can negatively impact your SEO performance over time, including during a core update. So, that can contribute to it. But generally speaking, I would say it's almost always some type of big content problem where, more often than not, again, I think sites that are investing too much or going too hard into SEO and doing slightly manipulative things for SEO purposes, and there's a pattern of that on the site, that tends to be the normal explanation for, I think, why sites tend to see really big drops.
Okay, so let's say you're one of those sites. Let's say you're a lawyer and you have been experiencing a huge drop from this update. What would you do? And kind of as a follow-up question to that, have you seen sites in that instant actually get their traffic back or recover?
Yeah, good question. So that's actually where I spend most of my time professionally in the last 10 or so years, is diagnosing sites that were hit. So the first thing you want to do is understand what got impacted. Generally speaking, if you get hit by a core update, you're going to see impact across the board, more or less. You're going to see a lot of different types of content on your site get hit, but you can see trends or something. Maybe a certain section of the website really disproportionately is carrying the impact, like it's seeing the biggest decline. And you can look for patterns there. So, and also you have to ask yourself, what have I done from an SEO perspective, or a link building perspective, or whatever it is in the last several years that could be something that Google has caught on to, right? That's always an important question to ask. Not everybody wants to be honest with the answer, right? But if it's like, okay, we know that we built a bunch of pages with AI content. We know that we built a bunch of city pages that are not super unique, right? We know that we paid for that link building package where we got 700 new links to our site, right? That's usually a good place to start. But if not, if you don't have answers to those questions, I would look at the type of content that got hit, look for patterns, and especially look for anything that could be perceived as SEO manipulation, which usually requires understanding Google's guidelines. They have a bunch of spam policies around content manipulation, scaled content abuse, thin content, doorway pages. Like, you have to know what all of those are, because almost always you can tie back something on your site into something that goes against their content policies.
Okay, so I'm going to give you a couple different scenarios. Let's say we have a site that you think the issue is the content. What do? Do you delete it? Do you redo it? What's your approach to that?
Yeah. So you asked about recovery. This is where I think it gets really complicated, right? Because what you would want to see and what clients want to see is, okay, I deleted it. Now I want to be back where I was, 2 weeks ago. We would all love that. Wouldn't that be nice? The problem is it doesn't work that way. If you receive a manual action from Google, which is a real penalty where you get a literal email, in your Google Search Console account that says we've flagged whether it's a page on your site, a section of your site, the full website for this exact issue, then you're in a situation where that content's usually going to be removed from search temporarily until you can do a reconsideration request and remove the content, right? Or change the content in some substantial way where you can then ask Google, I made these changes, is this okay? And then they decide yes or no whether they want to reinstate the content. If that happens, you can go back to where you were, assuming that, the content's reinstated, or, if you can get a reconsideration request lifted from Google, you can generally see pretty fast improvements from that. If you are hit by an algorithm update, it's a different conversation, because now it's not just a matter of fixing the problem. You have to fix the problem. You have to also keep improving your site, and you have to wait until Google's systems decide that you can be back in their good graces. And that could be one algorithm update later. It could be 2, it could be 3, it could be 4, it could be 1 year, it could be 2 years. And people hate hearing this because it's like, well, how can you know it worked? I've seen it time and time again. You make a bunch of changes, you wait for a year, and then suddenly it goes back to where it was before. Most people don't want to hear, I have to wait for a year, obviously, right? But that's just how it works. So that's why I'm always of the perspective that it's better to not get hit in the first place, because when you get hit, it's very hard to recover.
So let's say it was links. Okay, that's the second scenario, because we haven't really talked a lot about links. So if you have a pretty bad backlink profile, and I would say to define what a bad backlink profile is, any type of link building at scale where Google can recognize it is likely a bad backlink profile. So let's say that's your problem. In that case, is the steps that you would want to take different?
Yes. So Google has said many, many times over the last few years, whether people want to choose to believe them or not, that generally speaking, they just nullify those types of links. They just ignore them. Google would say you probably don't have to do anything. And I think the reason why Google says this is because a lot of people tend to misuse the Disavow tool, right? They might put a lot of things into Google's Disavow tool, which for anybody that doesn't know, that's a tool where you can literally say, I don't want these links to carry any value for my site anymore. And you can just upload a list of links to tell Google that they don't count anymore. I think Google sees a lot of people misusing or overusing that tool. So their best interest is to tell people, stop using that tool unless you really, really have to. Now, if you've been in a situation where you've identified, we think spammy links are a really big problem. This company's confirmed that they've done, a lot of shady link building. It's hard to get companies to admit that, but let's say they do admit that. And now you have a problem where they actively bought those links in a way that violates Google's link guidelines. I would say then you can use the Disavow tool, right? Because you know for a fact that there's some shady link building going on. And that's another problem. When you upload that list, it's not just you're not just going to see things reverse that day, right? You're going to have to also keep investing in high quality, earning links, high quality content, high quality branding. And over time, you can start to see the trend reverse. But that's a really hard one. So if you're buying a lot of links at scale for SEO, you're playing with fire, 100%. But sometimes, luckily, you can get a manual action. So in that case, you have a really clear idea that Google caught on to you. So I actually feel like in many cases, getting a manual action is better than an algorithm hit, because at least you know exactly what the problem is.
That's the unfortunate thing. From what I hear, manual actions are never happen anymore. So I was actually chatting with Charles Float, and I'm sure you're well aware of. He works with casino sites. Let's just say that the tactics that you use in SEO for casino sites is probably a little different than what Lily and I do. And he told me that he used to get a manual penalty once a day.
Wow.
On site that he works with, and he hasn't had one in years. So that was really telling to me, because I'm like, okay, if you're doing casino level stuff and you're not seeing them anymore, that's intriguing to me. So that kind of leads me to another question, which is the hidden penalties. I feel like with a manual action, at least that Google penalized your site. Whereas when we look at sites that got slaughtered with core updates, you talk about this thing called a classifier. Can you explain, first of all, what a classifier is, how you get it, and how would you even know if you have one?
Yeah, it's a good point. So the classifier was originally Google's language. I think in 2023 or so, they started to use that with regard to the helpful content update. And the way that they positioned it was that if your site is deemed as having too much unhelpful content, that's their language, they'll apply a classifier to it, and you'll feel this demotion happen across your site. It could be just one folder, but generally it's like the whole site starts to have like this demotion, right, across its performance. And until you get the classifier lifted by, like we talked about, removing a lot of the content, improving a lot of the content, really that's it, improving or removing it, you can start to see like the classifier get lifted, and then there's no longer this weight that's lowering all your rankings, and you have the same capacity to rank well as sites that don't have the classifier anymore. They changed their language, I want to say in 2024, where they said that they're not using the classifier anymore. But I do think that notion of like understanding how it works is still something that is kind of how it works, right? Whether or not it's a classifier, there's some type of like countermeasure that's on your site if they see that you're being negatively impacted. And that's like the main thing that I want to get at is when that suppression is happening, it's very, very hard to see any improvements, right? Even if you're creating a lot of great content, even if you're building a lot of links, it takes a really long time for Google to kind of remove that countermeasure from your site. And so, yeah, like I said before, the safest thing you can do, even though it's often slower moving, right? It doesn't achieve very, very fast, rapid results as some of these tactics do. The best thing you can do is to try to avoid being hit in the first place, so you never deal with that type of like demotion or classifier.
I sense that there are a lot of small businesses that actually got them in the last year, I should say, because some of that started with December. I've looked at a bunch of sites, local businesses, that the only thing that they're ranking for is branded search.
Yeah.
Like the entire site just gone. It looks very similar to like what we saw with the HCU back in 2023. It is something I've never seen for small businesses.
It's aggressive.
Until last year.
Yeah.
It is really aggressive. And I feel like for some reason, small businesses were immune originally. And I always thought it was because they had enough brand search to, obviously protect them from being lumped into like affiliate sites or sites with no branded search that got slaughtered in 2023. It's a little scary for small businesses because I'm like, yeah, that's a big hit. And I've literally seen tons of sites that look like that. I was just talking to somebody on Reddit the other day, and they showed me their search console, and it literally looks like that. As of the August update last year, just down to zero.
Yeah.
One thing that's really intriguing, I don't know if people know this or not, it does not impact local pack rankings at all. So if your site gets totally demolished, your Google Business Profile ranks as well as ever.
Like, so interesting.
Yeah, I don't know, but they're different algorithms, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if it impacts AI. I guess that's like TBD, but so far the local pack rankings are totally immune from your site getting hit.
That's interesting. That's something I'm digging into right now. I actually didn't know that about the local pack, but that makes a lot of sense, right? Because really like what Google's trying to reduce here is like manipulation in the organic search results, right? Companies that are like really doing anything that violates their content policies don't get to play anymore in the 10 blue links. But for local queries and for local like maps results, that business still exists, right? Even if they're doing some type of like manipulation, they still might be the best coffee shop down the street. So it's interesting that they don't actually factor in like any type of organic demotion into local search. But to your point about AI search, I'm actually looking at this a lot. Even today I've been looking at this for companies that have been negatively impacted by Google's recent algorithm changes, because they just rolled out stuff in the last 2 weeks. I'm seeing a corresponding drop in ChatGPT citations as well as AI mode and AI overviews.
Okay. Dropping in citations, like, so they're not getting referenced as much. Are
Correct.
They getting lots of traffic as well, or we don't know that yet?
Well, a drop in ChatGPT citations would probably lead to a drop in traffic coming from ChatGPT, even though ChatGPT is tiny anyway. But yeah, I mean, what I'm looking at like a couple different tools that I use to track visibility and citations across AI search. And you can see that there's this like the same trend that you're seeing in organic search tends to align with AI citations across different LLMs as well.
Yeah, let's talk about the January update, because you've alluded to it a few times, and I will tell you that we have seen definitely the impacts of this, and I think it's drastic. So I've seen quite a few sites, small business sites, that are seeing big dips as of January 19th. So you did a write-up on it that I think kind of shook the industry a bit, talking about how Google was going after self-serving listicles, meaning if you are a business and you have, let's say you're a lawyer, and you have a page that's like, here's the top 10 lawyers in Tampa, and then you list yourself first and then list a bunch of your competitors. We see those rank all over the place, for the record, like works phenomenally. You had mentioned that you're seeing that Google is starting to hit those, which I can confirm. I definitely had a client that had one of those on their site and it did go to nothing. That being said, there's lots of other ones I've seen where they're totally fine.
For sure.
So what are you seeing pattern wise with that update so far?
Yeah, for sure. So it's something that I've been paying close attention to because it's a tactic that has become very popular in the space for obvious reasons. Like you said, it works phenomenally, right? It's almost too good to be true, right? It's so easy, right? You just put an article listing yourself number 1, and then a bunch of your friends is 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And then you all link to each other's articles, and voila, it works in AI search. When you have something like that, it doesn't last forever. And it's just a question of how long until Google and maybe even OpenAI decides we're going to change our system so that type of thing doesn't work anymore. So I've been kind of watching that, seeing how long that tactic works. And what I was looking at, it was basically January 20th or so, 2026, when I saw a lot of companies losing really, really fast, right? Losing organic visibility very, very quickly. And I was surprised to see a number of brands on that list that are very big brands, well-known brands, usually in the B2B space and SaaS as well, who lost a lot of visibility to their blog starting on January 21st. And when I see a pattern like that, where it's like lots of sites are just experiencing the same thing, makes it easier for me to drill down and see if there's something that they're all doing that's very similar. And I started to check that. And I was very surprised to see not one of these articles, not 7 of these articles, right? But 200 of them or 300 of them. Like, this is obviously a pattern, which I think points to the fact that it's much easier for Google to demote something when there's a pattern there. And I think what they're starting to do is roll out a change where if you're misusing and overusing this tactic, you're going to start to see visibility decline. Now, the fact that they're doing it algorithmically, right, and looking for patterns, I think explains why, yes, many sites still see it working. Many sites still have 4 of these articles, 1 of these articles, whatever it is, and it's still working really well. I just don't know if Google's done yet, right? Like, this is just the start. And I wouldn't be surprised if they got more precise over the year with demoting that type of content.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I keep hearing is if you want to be safe from that, you got to get other sites to recommend you, which sounds great in theory, but it might be more difficult practically. So obviously awards, things like being listed on top best lists are great for LLMs. Do you have any tips for businesses on how to get included on those?
Yeah. Well, it's a can of worms, right? Because anything that can be manipulated will be and already is being, right? So there's a lot. It's not just the self-serving listicles that are prone to manipulation. It's any listicle that potentially has like sponsored posts, right? Or sponsored listings. That's something that Google's been trying to go after for a long time. And it's very, very hard for them to get it right 100% of the time, right? Because a lot of these rankings and these listicles and these affiliate sites and everything are operating behind closed doors to take payment, to take, people saying, how much does it cost to be included on your list, right? And it's very hard for search engines to know when that's happening. That being said, in the US at least, you have to legally disclose when something's pay to play on the page. So in theory, they could be looking at that type of like sponsored relationship down the line. And there's also been other examples like Google's site reputation abuse policy, where if you have a lot of this sponsored content, they say, okay, we're just going to remove this from organic search, right? A lot of companies a couple of years back, big publishers that had all types of, best vitamins, best whatever, all these pages, all of that was removed with site reputation abuse. So I think right now, yes, there's pay to play. I think a lot of brands are doing that. I personally think it's a better long-term investment to try to be organically mentioned in the best of lists as much as possible. And unfortunately, the best way to do that is to be perceived as the best brand, right? It's to look at what people are saying about your brand online and the top competing brands and understand why they keep being ranked as the best and just try to be the best in the space. That's the safest way to do it.
So as far as SEO tactics, what tactics, like you're an SEO company, you're deploying SEO, what tactics are working really, really well for you right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I've seen is the more all the boxes are checked from an SEO perspective in terms of having a great technical foundation, having really good information architecture, having high quality content, having a good social media presence, like all the things we've talked about in the SEO space for a really long time that tend to produce higher rankings. They do tend to work really, really well in AI search as well. We've seen on the AMSO site, for example, that when we publish an article, within a day, it appears in ChatGPT. Within a day, it appears in Perplexity. And that's because, first of all, these models, as well as SEO, for many queries, tends to cite, recently updated information. So if you're putting out a new piece of content with new research and new information, that can be cited really well in both SEO and AI search. But the reason I mentioned having all those foundations there as well is because what we see is like the more powerful and authoritative your site is, because it's following all those best practices, the more quickly it appears that you get picked up in AI search. So I really feel like a lot of those fundamentals, including, performance, tech SEO, EEAT, good content quality, diversifying your content across lots of different channels, all of that supports AI search as well and leads to really fast brand mentions and citations.
So EEAT, you mentioned that. So I have a couple questions about that. This is a question from David Quaid, which he sent on X. How do we stop people thinking EEAT is something they add to pages?
Yeah. I wish I had the answer to that. How do we stop people from selling backlinks on LinkedIn, high quality backlinks? It's like when something the cat gets out of the bag as something that people believe can be an easy switch that you flip in SEO and it's just that simple, lots and lots of people jump on the bandwagon and think they oversimplify something that is actually a lot more complicated than they realize. So I've been trying since day one of talking about EEAT, back when it used to be called EAT, to write articles about misconceptions, misunderstandings. No, it's not a ranking factor. No, it's not something where you can just put an author name on the page and then that's all you need to do for EAT. It's just people love to oversimplify things. And people love to think that there's some magic trick that they can do and then EEAT is taken care of, right? That's just not how it works. There's 160 pages in Google site quality guidelines that explain how EEAT works and what Google's search quality evaluators should consider about EEAT. It's a very complex thing, right? There's a lot that goes into it. They're looking at not only who the authors are, but does that author have a presence across different sites where they are perceived as an expert? How long has the author worked in the field? What other evidence do you have that they're a real expert? Are they a real person? Do they have real headshots? Do they have a book that they sold, right? It's like there's so many different ways you can evaluate someone's expertise. And that stuff is very, very hard to fake, right? It's not just that. It's, does this website have a lot of evidence that they're like testing the products when they do product reviews, that they're citing really, really trustworthy sources in the space and doing a lot of research? Like there's so many, many things that go into demonstrating good EEAT. Unfortunately, it's not something that can be oversimplified. It's not just adding an author name. You really have to think more broadly than that. So I think it's just a problem with the industry in general is we like to oversimplify things and we think that there's just a checklist you can follow, but you really need to understand conceptually, how would I really truly convey that I am an expert and that my site and my company and my leaders are really authoritative in the space? And that's a hard question to answer.
So I have a question from our audience. I own an online dispute resolution company and want to know, as Google leans harder into EEAT and trust signals, how should businesses think about review integrity? Not just review volume, but especially when fake, defamatory, or even AI-generated reviews are influencing local rankings. Do you see Google moving more towards a formal dispute resolution or verification layers in local search? I can say fake reviews are rampant. They are everywhere in local search. So it's really frustrating. How would you respond to that?
I agree with you. I think it's probably one of the areas of Google that's most prone to spam and manipulation right now. And one of the areas that I think AI is making that problem exponentially worse, right? I think over the past few weeks, I've seen all kinds of posts about people using agents and, AI to scale fake reviews across different Google Maps, locations. And I think this is a really big problem that Google and, other maps providers needs to solve. I don't think they've solved it yet at all. I don't think they've even come close. I think also, this already, but before AI, we already had a really big problem with fake reviews, right? So I hope that they're doing something. I think in many cases, it takes them maybe a year or two to like, okay, we figured out a solution that we're going to roll out. That's why we get big algorithm updates and things like that. But right now, I think they've got a bigger challenge than they've ever had with AI and fake reviews.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not holding my breath in the sense that I don't think they've tackled it in, almost 20 years of being in the industry. So I'm not sure what they're going to come out with now, but I agree that it's hard. I think the only solution for small businesses is for like law enforcement to somehow get involved, right? Like if it somehow becomes illegal where there's actual penalties, not from necessarily from Google, but like, a business losing their license or whatnot. I think that would actually work if that was a thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a tough one. I still would strongly vote for continuing to like do the best things. And as far as reporting your competitors, I know that's something that some people advise on. My current stance on reporting fake reviews is that it's a giant waste of time.
Right.
It doesn't seem to do anything. Google's systems are not sophisticated enough to actually detect that they're fake. So unfortunately, that tactic doesn't appear to work.
I think I agree with you. I think the thing that I've seen work is with Google is they need a big enough incentive to change something, right? So the big incentives, like you said, either come from legal issues or it could come from, a lot of pressure on Google as a company for whatever reason, or it could be a lot of press attention. If enough people are writing about the fake review problem on Google, didn't that happen a few years back?
Yeah. So actually the one time in my life that I have seen a business listing get suspended for fake reviews, just once, it was because they got picked up in the local press for having fake reviews and Google deleted their listing and like nuked their listing along with all the reviews. I've never seen them do that. But they did it when this one business got press. And it's just sad.
Yeah.
I don't know. As much as I like to be like a Google fan, I also some days just want to like scream. Like it's so frustrating.
I honestly wish the web spam team was bigger than it was, if I'm being honest. They have a lot of work to do.
So I have to ask you this, and I know this is kind of a long answer, but I'm looking for a short answer for this one. Negative SEO, is it something that you have personally witnessed?
Yes.
Okay. So you agree it's a thing?
It can be. Yeah, it can be. There's all kinds of different applications. Yeah.
Okay. And if you saw a site that you felt was getting hit with negative SEO, what would be your first go-to?
That's a really hard one. Again, I think, believe it or not, as much as mitigating, the issue with, let's say, like, DMCA takedowns or whatever, like legal, approaches might be at your disposal, having cease and desists or whatever. It's bringing attention to the issue. I think when you expose something publicly, maybe you don't have to name names, but you can explain, we see what's happening here, and this is why it's working as well as it is. And that article might go viral and you might get picked up in really big publications. That's when Google might start to pay attention. So again, it's just bringing awareness to something really bad happening is your best recourse.
It's a good answer. All right. We come to the section where we're going to do some rapid fire questions. So I'm going to ask you a question, even though it's often a loaded question, you have about 30 seconds to give me a response. So a lot of these are going to be yes, no, and maybe like a slight explanation. So up first, is AI content killing SEO? Yes or no?
No.
You can elaborate. You have 30 seconds or just no.
It's not killing SEO. It's presenting a lot of new challenges. It's also presenting a lot of new opportunities. But if you're misusing it in a way that destroys your site, in that sense, it could be killing your SEO. But there's all kinds of sophisticated ways to use AI that are helpful for SEO.
Got it. What is the fastest way to lose Google's trust?
I would say scaling lots of content really, really quickly. Like publishing 1,000 or 2,000, 5,000 pages a day for a long time.
What is one SEO myth that refuses to die?
God. It's not exactly a myth, but I would say people selling low quality links and thinking that it's really going to work because I get like 50 of those emails every day for 15 years. It's like,
we're saying that in the local space, it does work short term. So, you'll see the increase until the next core update.
For sure.
What are the biggest mistakes that SEOs are making in 2026?
Losing sight of what they should be focusing on and in terms of what really moves the needle for the companies that they're working with, because they're way too excited about AI search. Trying to chase a citation in Perplexity or something when your conversion experience on your website is broken or not optimized, right? So it's shiny object syndrome, I would say.
Are core updates getting harsher or are sites just getting worse?
Core updates are getting harsher. Google is getting smarter and smarter and more aggressive with cracking down on sites than they used to be.
100%. We're seeing that like full scale. If you had to bet on one ranking factor for the future, what is it?
I just said EEAT is not a ranking factor and it continues to not be a ranking factor. But if you were to basically extrapolate, like let's call it one factor that encompasses all the EEAT principles, I think that's the one that's going to win out long term. So you can think of it as like real true authenticity and expertise and experience, and like whatever proxy they're using to evaluate that, call it site quality, right? I think that's going to be the most important over time.
Okay. Is Google more broken or more intelligent than ever?
Ooh, that's a good question. Both things are true at the same time. Only because, yes, they're more intelligent than ever. Obviously, they have all these new AI capabilities and everything. But I think that because the company is shifting so many resources towards AI right now, it's creating a lot of issues, a lot of broken things, a lot of spam. Think about like the local space being super spammed. So in that sense, a lot of stuff is kind of broken. But I think that their capabilities are more intelligent than they've ever had. Maybe it's just a question of what their priorities are right now.
I think their priorities are selling more ads.
Yeah,
it's just my take.
Always.
Can a site be permanently damaged by Google?
Yes.
And what should you do in that instance? Is like you get a new website or domain, I should say?
Yeah, I mean, I guess permanently, like technically, you can probably do something eventually to maybe fix it. I've just most of the examples I've seen of that, people give up, right? They might give up after a number of years. But yeah, in theory, if you relaunch the site, right, and everything's completely different, you get rid of all the history and you really, really double down on creating a good product, maybe over years, you can see an improvement. But most companies don't wait that long.
No. Well, Lily, I know we're at time here. It's been really fantastic being able to chat with you. Can you tell our audience just where they can find you if they have further questions?
For sure, yeah. I'm pretty active every day on LinkedIn, on X, on Blue Sky, and sometimes on Threads as well. But yeah, if you Google Lily Ray, you can pick your platform of choice.
Awesome. All right, well, that's all that we have for today. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.